Hello, extra time.
They point to the league not to get a high because it damages your reputation. It makes people, when they read it, just laugh at you.
The single block, they're playing in the League One and they're playing in the Europa League and they're credit to the game in this country. Maybe we should get Stephen Kenny down to manage the Irish team.
Welcome everybody to another episode of the extratime.com podcast. Your host Luke Jordan. Delighted to say Dave Donnelly and Stephen Kavanagh alongside me. Dave, how are you?
Grand, not too bad. How are you?
Yeah, I'm not too bad. And Steve, your long-awaited return. How are you?
I know, yeah. Been waiting a while for it, but it's nice to be back. Yeah, thanks for having me.
I suppose only one place really to start, and that's we haven't had you on since the removal of Keith Long as Bohemians manager. How have you found the post Keith Long era the last few weeks?
Yeah, it was funny actually because I remember the last time I was on, I was saying, "Oh yeah, he has enough credit in the bank to last at least until the end of the season," I'd say, and he was gone the following day, maybe the day after that. So yeah, I kind of found it a little bit of a strange one. I thought he'd kind of see it out to the end of the season, but he obviously went ahead and pulled the trigger, and it all kind of seemed like it was coming together. It was all rosy in the garden with the win a couple of days afterwards with Eric Pender in charge, and we got the win against Rovers that no one was really expecting. Like in that performance, it was just sort of the complete opposite to what we had. Up until that point, like the players looked up for it. There was tackles flying in. People were actually, making extra runs. People were really, really putting the hard yards in. So we kind of thought, right, okay, Detzer's after giving them a bit of a kick. Hopefully we can sort of kick on now for the rest of the season, maybe even chance fourth spot and get into Europe if Derry or someone wins the cup. And then the wheels all fell off again after that. It just it was that little bit of false hope, I think, a bit of a false start. Obviously we've had the couple of wins recently against Harps and against UCD there last week. But even before that, we had the humbling at the hands of Shells. So I was down in Talca Park for that one. It was an unpleasant one to say the least. But it's a little bit of a strange situation, I think, that we've found ourselves in, because we're after getting rid of the manager. Pender's after coming in now for the last couple of games. There's rumours flying around left, right and centre as to who the new boss is going to be, without anyone actually seeming to have any inside knowledge, really. So yeah, I suppose only time will tell on that front.
On the defeat and against Shells, like it obviously was a tough day, and like even I was surprised by the reaction even of the fans. Like there was a lot of boos in the away section and players coming over to thank the fans. It was very hostile, to say the least.
It was, yeah, and that was only the fans who had actually stayed until the end. There was a huge amount of them, especially because a lot of the time away fans would be penned in for 20 minutes, half an hour after the match to let all the crowds die down a bit. So a lot of people kind of, once they realised that the gates were going to be closed, they made their way out. But yeah, I stayed for the end of it. It was hostile, and I think the thing about it was not the fact that we had lost, not the fact that we'd been well beaten 3-0. It was the fact that there was such a small amount of effort put in by the players. There wasn't heads getting up looking for a pass, looking to give the ball. There wasn't really any, really defence splitting passes. The defence was all over the place. It looked like they had never seen a 1-2 before in their life. So it was one of those things that, especially after what we had seen that they could do against Rovers, if they had actually put the hard yards in. I know we've had a load of injuries and things like that, which hasn't helped. But I think it's just the fact that we expect a greater effort, not even, a better result or anything like that. We just expect a better effort. And I think that's all sort of any football fan can ask for, that the players who are there, for the club, for the fans, that the players actually put in the effort, and that just wasn't there to be seen in Talca that day.
If you were to wave a magic wand today, is there any ideal candidate in your head you'd like to see take the boss job?
Jurgen Klopp.
Okay, let's try Euro Saver magic wand. He bought one.
The Euro Saver, right? Okay. Have I won? I think you'd have to probably say Crawford for, I don't know how likely or unlikely it is. But the job that he's done with the under-21s has been fairly admirable. I'd like to see him, get a go at a League of Ireland club. Not to say that he'd leave the under-21s or anything like that, because he's done such a good job, just missing out on penalties against Israel there the other day. And but it's a weird one, because I think a lot of the time, whether a manager is proven or not, I've seen Stephen Rice and Vinnie Perth and names like that have been banded around the place. Richard Dunn obviously then was another one whose name had come up quite a lot. I did see an article there yesterday, I think, that he was out of the running. But it's a bit of a strange one, I think, with Irish football, that a lot of the time it can be a bit of a leap of faith with managers, because we may not know a huge amount about them. So yeah, I'd say just because the job that he's done with the under-21s, and he's probably the potentially the highest pedigree of the names that I've seen linked around the place, I'd probably have to say Jim Crawford.
Yeah, I think Jim Crawford is a non-runner. I was speaking to him a couple of weeks ago before the Israel game, and he said that he's 90% of the way to signing a new contract with the FAI, and he has really no intention of moving from there. So yeah, I don't think that's a runner.
That doesn't really surprise me, because of the job that he's done with them. So, like I say, that's just that would have been my ideal preference of the names that were linked, because he's done such a good job, and because of the setup and everything that they have there. I think I always knew it was a bit of a punt. It was a bit of a stretch, but yeah, it's a bit of a strange one, because I think whoever comes in anyway is going to have their work cut out for them. There's a lot of those players. I think Dan Lambert was on the podcast a couple of weeks ago and said we have 14 players signed up for next season. And from what we've seen this season, probably really as a whole, a lot of those players don't really look up to it, don't really look good enough. So it's just going to have to be someone who can actually come in, give the players a bit of a kickstart. And I've no doubt that a lot of these players have quality. It's just someone coming in to actually get them to show it.
Yeah, no, I think Bulls are in a bit of a different position maybe than they were a few years ago, because they're full time now, obviously. So
yeah,
it's a different type of manager you're looking for now. I've seen Ian Ryan mentioned he's a full time teacher. I can't really see him taking a career break to take over Bowles. Maybe I'm wrong, but I know Alan Reynolds seems to have ruled himself out as well. Richard Dunn obviously was mentioned as well, but wouldn't be hugely surprised if maybe you saw somebody similar to Waterford with Danny Searle, like bringing in somebody from outside the league, from another country, who might come in and be able to, I suppose, devote their time full time to the job. But at the moment, I don't think the club is in a huge rush. There's a month left in the season. As you said before, I don't think there's an awful lot to play for anymore. So I think the club will just take their time, find the right candidate, and we'll see what happens over the winter.
Is that not a bit of a mistake, though, in terms of, if that is the club's idea? Like, if I'm sitting there as a board director of the club, I'd like to get the new man in now so he can have these excess games, to have a look at the existing squad, to then make a judgment call whether he sees them as part of his plan or not. That'd be my personal opinion. I don't know what you guys think.
Yeah, I'd probably agree with that. All right, I'd say I would have liked to have thought that once the pressure was really starting to heap on top of Keith Long, that they would have had somebody in mind. They would have, had somebody knocking on the door maybe. I would have kind of hoped that there was a bit more of a plan in place, as opposed to just pull the trigger on Keith Long and, go from there. Obviously, Derek Pender is in there at the moment with Trevor Crowley. I don't think Pender has his A license yet, which is why Crowley is sticking around, I suppose. But, there's the potential that it could remain with the same setup, I suppose, for a little while. But don't really, especially with Pender not having his A license or anything like that, I don't really see it as being a long term fix. Wouldn't
Yeah,
surprise me
the
really if
same
they got
thing
to
with
the end of the
Crawley is
season.
that Crawley has a full time job as well, so I don't think he'd be interested full time, long term in a full time project either. So you're kind of that's what I'm saying about it being kind of a difficult one because the usual candidates don't really apply because it's a full time club now, and you're going to need somebody who can devote their time to going to training in the morning and be a full time manager.
That's the thing, yeah, because I think they pretty much been full time, but I think it's from next season onwards they're starting to go for training in the morning. So yeah, like you say, it's going to have to be someone who can devote their time to the club, who can devote their energy to the club, and obviously most importantly get the players playing for the club as well.
Is Roddy Collins a candidate now, Dave?
I'm not sure that he would go there. I don't think he's going to manage again anyway. But yeah, I think again, Roddy has a full time job, so it's a bit different again. But I think my instinct is maybe they'll look outside the league because there's not too many people in the country. They already got lucky with Rory Higgins and Alan Reynolds, but there's not an awful lot of people in the country who can afford, I suppose, to take a risk on full-time football. So you might be looking at somebody coming in from abroad, or else somebody who's already employed at another club, or somebody who just happens to be in a position where they're not working full time and they can move up to a job like that. But just my instinct, I think it's 50%. It might be somebody from abroad.
Just to clarify there, that was a bit tongue in cheek mention Roddy Collins. I wasn't actually
Although funny enough that you mentioned him, I think kind of probably about half an hour after Long got the bullet that I'd seen that Roddy had ruled himself out. And then I saw something else on Twitter yesterday or today saying that he had officially rejected the job. And I was kind of thinking, yeah, I'm not sure they would have offered it in the first place, especially when he had said so publicly that he didn't want it. But yeah, I don't know. I reckon it's probably there doesn't seem to be a huge amount of candidates out there that fit the bill 100% for the club. So there's been rumors about, this person's going to be announced tomorrow or this person's going to be announced the next day. So at the moment, I think it's a bit of just wait and see.
Yeah,
I just throw in Andrei Kanchelskis because I always do, because years and years ago, after Roddy left Derry, Andrei Kanchelskis applied for the job and he didn't get it. So I don't know, just throwing that out there.
That would be the most bizarre, I think, managerial appointment when Drake and Chelsea comes to the League of Ireland. That would be quite a bizarre one. Trying to think, what's the most bizarre appointment the last 25 years? Trying to think now. I know Brian Laws was an interesting one when he went to Rovers.
I think any of Waterford's appointments. Kevin Sheedy, Mike Newell.
Yeah, they were good. That was a good one, yeah.
John Sheridan was more entertaining than anybody else.
Yeah, the public comment, yeah, and Vinny going mad. Yeah, they were quite bizarre ones. Hey, we'll move on. Had a quick look through the results from last weekend in the Premier Division. Pats 0, Derry 1, Bows 1, UCD 0, Dundalk 2, Drogheda United 0, Finn Harps 1, Shells 1, and Sligo 1, Shamrock Rovers 3. And then, of course, then Monday night we had that bonkers game in Talga Park. Shells 4, Pats 4. I suppose I thought if you're for a Derry City fan, we were kind of briefly discussing last week Rory Higgins about a title chase. But Dave, I think if you wanted the title to open up there, you kind of need a Sligo to take points off Rovers there, I think, to kind of open up. What do you think?
Yeah, I think I still think it'd be hard to see the title race going down to the last day. I know Derry are in great form. I just can't see them winning absolutely every game, especially when they're playing Rovers. And Rovers do have that 5-point lead. So I think I hope to be wrong. I hope to see a title race because we haven't seen one in a few years. But yeah, I just think it's maybe a bit beyond Derry at this point. But in terms of next season, I think it's starting to line up to look very exciting.
Yeah. And Steve, were you at Bows UCD in Daniel Park?
I was, yeah. That match was probably the best way to describe it. I think it was just a chore. It was kind of a chore to actually have to watch it. It was a bit of a non-event. I think it's looking like now Bo's games are just kind of get to the end of the season, with minimal injuries and anything like that, just kind of coast along. Pretty much all the games seem to be sort of dead rubber now at this stage. UCD had one or two chances. That might actually be being unkind. They had a couple of chances that I can remember anyway. But it was one of those that I think Bo's sort of did the bare minimum, which is disappointing, but I suppose a win's a win.
Yeah. I suppose the most exciting part of the division there really is is the bottom two. Who's going to go automatics and who's going to go into the playoff? It's Bowen played 31, both 19 games. The only difference is UCD's goal difference slightly worse. It's actually hard to call, Dave. That's a tough call to make. Who's going to drop out first?
Yeah, it's hard to know because it looked like a couple of weeks ago, it looked like Harps might be dropping away. But we all know about the infamous Harps finish to the season. Whenever it starts raining and it gets really cold, they always start picking up points. So it's starting to look like a bit of an interesting one in it. Now I know Shell scoring that equaliser last week kind of took a bit of the shine off Harps' result, but they are ahead on goal difference now. And I would, in every season when this happens, because this happens every season, I always back Harps to do it, and Ollie Horgan always comes up trumps for me. So I think it's going to be difficult for UCD from now on, especially with Rovers on the final day, potentially with a game that Rovers need to win. So that'll be interesting. But it's my money is on Harps at the moment, and I don't think anyone else is going to be dragged into it at this point either.
No, I think Drogheda and Shells are quite safe at the moment. I suppose the other kind of interesting part left of the league is the third, fourth playoff to who's going to get the Europe automatic. I'm hoping Pats will pip Dundalk, but this Friday night's a huge game. Who's going to kind of, if Dundalk do beat Pats this weekend, I think that's the end of that kind of race there.
It's Stevie O'Donnell derby.
Yeah, I love to go into it, but I can't make it, unfortunately. I have an event actually on Friday, but it's gonna be an interesting one. I know we got even Monday night, that was disappointing. Obviously losing to Derry, you're hoping for a win, but then I have 4-2 down, you take a 4-all, but defensively didn't look great. Poor kind of goals against Eden. I know.
Yeah, I think you can just have a bad game as well, because just looking at Dundalk and looking at Pats, I don't think either side is particularly better or particularly worse than each other. So I think with 5 games to go, it is still kind of up in the air. It's advantage Dundalk at the moment, but I wouldn't make a bet on it either.
No, yeah, I think that's I reluctantly agree. I think it's fans from Dundalk, but if Pats can go the Oriole this weekend and pick up the win to close the gap to 1, then it's all bets are off. Yeah, I think we'll park that there and we'll move on to part 2, lads. And earlier this week, myself and Steve chatted to Danny Searle, the Waterford FC manager. So let's have a listen.
Get in touch. You can email us at extratimelive@gmail.com or tag us on Instagram using the hashtag League of Ireland, or tweet us at extratimenews.
Let's do it.
And now I'm delighted to say Waterford FC manager Danny Searle is with us. Danny, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you, guys. How are you?
Yeah, not too bad. Before we get into yourself, a quick chat about the game last week. 3-1 against Cove Ramblers. Must have been delighted to get another win on the board.
Yeah, look, we've won 3 league games in a row. I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I'm overly happy with it, because I thought we weren't particularly great in all 3 of the games, to be honest. I thought we were much better than what we showed. But listen, 9 points from 9, you can't really moan too much. We scored 8 goals, but yeah, I think there's definitely some room for improvement there.
Yeah, well, I think the highlight of your run so far is definitely the 3-2 win against Dundalk. That must have been a great occasion.
Yeah, look, the cup is quite close to everyone in Waterford's hearts, because they've not been as successful as they probably should have been over the years in the competition. And I think that when you saw the draws and the potential pathway we were going to have to get to the final, I think quite a few people wrote us off, and we've taken 2 big Premier League scouts in those 3 games, and we're going to need to do another one if we're going to get any further. So no, listen, the vibe's good. Everyone's buzzing, and obviously being in a cup at this stage of the season is a fantastic achievement.
Yeah, we don't have to mention the fact that you beat my own closing Pash Celtic in the first round. But we'll move. We'll move on from that one, Danny. Before we even talk more about Waterford, I'd love to chat with yourself personally. For yourself, where did you grow up in England?
So I'm an Essex boy, born and bred in Essex. My family, both sides of my family, are from all over the place in England. But yeah, I was born and bred in Romford in Essex, and yeah, that's for all my sins. That was where it started, and my family is still there now. So a lot of close ties to that area.
And growing up, then I imagine you played for a local club, or did you play in the academies growing up in England, or what was your playing for like?
So obviously the academy system when I was growing up was a lot different than it was now. I mean, they weren't academies; they were centres of excellence and schools of excellence. So I played for my local teams, and at the age of around 13, 14, I got scouted for Colchester United, and it kind of kicked on from there, really, from a playing perspective. But to be honest, it wasn't that much into my kind of career, if you want to call it a career, that I knew that I wasn't going to be earning a living out of the game playing, because I was okay, and I had a decent non-league career up until the age of about 24, 25. But coaching was always going to be my pathway, I think.
And whereabouts did you play? What position?
So it's a funny one, because I had some trials at quite a few pro clubs, and I was actually a goalkeeper. And anyone who stood next to me knows that was never ever going to be a journey that I was going to be able to be successful in, because I'm about 5'10" and a half. So that was never going to lead me down that pathway. But I'd always played a lot on field when I was younger, and it was quite an easy transition. And I gave up playing in goal, and I went and played in the non-league system in England as a relatively combative central midfielder stroke defender. So I was fortunate enough to be able to play at a decent level on the pitch as well.
Who did you support growing up, actually?
West Ham. So I've got a very, very big family. On my mum's side, there's about 23 cousins, something like that. There's a few of us, and we're literally split down the middle, Tottenham and West Ham. And when you're born in our family, there's a fight for who you're going to support. And I probably, up until my early years, I've been to as many Spurs games as I had West Ham games. And whether people say it's a right decision or a wrong decision, I chose the West Ham route. And they're my club. And I think as you get older, I mean, especially when you're in a position I'm in, I tend to support managers and players more than teams now. Obviously West Ham is my club, but I've got a big affection for certain managers and styles of play and players, and I like watching all football, to be fair. But yeah, I'd have to say West Ham's my team. Would
you have fond memories then, say, of the Harry Redknapp era?
Yeah, look, I was actually on trial at the club when Redknapp was in charge, and I was fortunate enough to play in the same teams as Frank Lampard and Rio Ferdinand and players like that, albeit for a short period of time. But yeah, look, I've had some amazing memories. Supporting West Ham is fantastic in some ways, because it makes you resilient, because you're used to losing and heartbreak and things happening on a regular basis that kind of set you up for life. So I owe them a lot, to be fair, because I'm used to being able to deal with anything that goes against you, because West Ham certainly would throw that your way. And but no, look, I've had some fantastic memories as a West Ham supporter, and my love of the game has come through watching some of the fantastic players that have played for the club.
Just some of the players you mentioned there, are you able to tell at a very young age that they're special players? Like you mentioned Ferdinand Lampard, having played them briefly. Like, can you just tell even on the pitch them like these guys are going to go straight to the top, or is it maybe not the case at that age?
I think Frank was. Ben, I only played in the same team as them for probably a few months. I wasn't there for long enough to probably have a real good idea of what they were about. And Rio was injured for a part of the time I was there. But you just see the way they carried themselves around the training ground, and the kind of way they approached everyday training, the sort of psychological things, the off the field things that you can't try and preach to young players about earning careers. They had that. They worked harder than everyone else. They were there longer than everyone else, and you can name dozens of them that have been through the ranks, not only when I was there as a trialist, but also when I was there as a coach, that you can just see they're going to have a career in the game because their mentality around everything they do is just different to everybody else. And the cliches around talent and potential and how so many players slip through the ranks. I think that if you're really that dedicated and you're really that disciplined and your mentality's right, I don't think you do slip through. I think you find a way. And those two, well, I mean, the proof's in the pudding for them. I think that if you look at their trophy cabinets, they're mouth-watering, aren't they?
Yeah, and obviously had fantastic careers. For yourself, you mentioned it there. When did you decide that I'd like to go into coaching? Was that at a very young age, or was it like late teens or early 20s? What age were you when you're around said I'd like to go into coaching? That's the career I'd like to have.
So my actual first coaching experience, I was about 14. I was playing in goal for a top local side. I was currently on trial at Colchester United, and a guy who worked for my dad, his boy played for a local team, and he said they've got some really young goalkeepers, and would I be interested in doing some work with them on a Saturday morning if I was around? And I said, yeah, like I've never done it before. I've had some very good coaches myself, and yeah, I've put on a few sessions, and I had these 12 between 12 and 16 little goalkeepers turn up with the old-fashioned goalie gloves on, and I loved it. And I think I charged £1.50 per goalkeeper to come and have some coaching, a little bit of pocket money for myself, and to get some experience. And I think then the people around kind of said to me, you've definitely got an aptitude for working with players. And I was 14 at the end of the day. I laughed it off and was like, yeah, no, I'm going to play in the Premier League and I'm going to be a multi-millionaire, and coaching is the last thing that I want to do. But as those kind of 15, 16, 17 years come up, I set up my own soccer school just before I turned 17. So I knew that there was going to be a route of coaching for me at some point. And yeah, I think that was a very early age. I recognised that, and I was fortunate enough that I did have an aptitude for it, and it stood me in good stead.
So you'd say you got the bug then around, say, 17, 18 to maybe progress further as a coach?
Yeah, I set up a goalkeeping school. I was at Dagenham and Redbridge at the time, and I set up a goalkeeping school, and I got some unbelievable media around it. Only like local press, but they kind of picked it up and run with it. And I remember my first night, because nobody really did it. No, there wasn't really any goalkeeping schools around in my area. And albeit I was only sort of 17 myself, I ended up with like 35, 40 goalkeepers turn up. And I wasn't expecting that at all. And they just come flooding in because there was a real need for it. And I loved it. I absolutely loved it. And obviously I was still playing, so I was so passionate anyway. And I was fortunate that quite a few goalkeepers came through my ranks and went on to have careers as well. So you kind of thrive on that. And yes, you want to make a living and you'd love to pay your bills and whatnot. But when you see players you've worked with over the years go on and have some success, and if you've played a small part in that, that's just as big a bonus as any cash reward you can get. So, but yeah, definitely those sort of mid-teens, I really, really picked it up, and I knew that was going to be my journey.
So you finished up around 24, 25, you're saying? Is that when you finished up playing?
Yeah, so well, basically I was playing non-league. I played for quite a few non-league teams, and a decent level for what my ability level was. I was quite pleased with what I achieved, but it came to a stage where my coaching was really taking off. I decided by that time that I wanted to coach outfield players, not goalkeepers. I wanted to work with teams. I wanted to go into management. I'd already decided at that point, and it was clear that I wasn't going to earn enough money playing even non-league. As much as there's good money in non-league football, I was not available for evenings to coach where I could have made a lot more money. I'd started a young family at that time, and I had to make a decision. And rightly or wrongly, I decided that there's some time to hang the boots up and focus on my coaching and my career and what I could potentially build doing that. So, yeah, that was the end of that for me.
And what was your first step on the professional ladder in terms of coaching?
So I had my actual first job was after I got released from West Ham on trial. So there was a coach there called Ronnie Gale who let me go and basically said, like, listen, we're not going to be giving you anything here. And he then moved to Southend United, and he phoned me up and said, would I work with the School of Excellence goalkeepers at Southend United? And I was like, Ronnie, I'm 18 years old. Like, these lads are 2 years younger than me, some of them. And he was like, yeah, but we've seen how you are around the place, and I've seen you do some coaching, and I'd like you to come and do it. So actually, my first actual, I suppose, professional football club experience was probably 17, 18 years old. And I was working as the lead goalkeeping coach at Southend United's School of Excellence with the young lads. And that was a fantastic opportunity, fantastic experience. But then probably after that, I'd been running my soccer school for quite a while, and a lot of scouts and a lot of local clubs had tried to, local professional clubs had tried to get into me to sort of say, can you sort of send your players our way because you're producing a lot of talented lads. And I ended up starting to do some work with Chelsea. Chelsea approached me and basically said that, look, we want you to come and work with one of our development centres and help us with our recruitment. But also we've seen that you've got a good level of coaching behind you, and we want you to work with our players. And yeah, it kind of, once that happened, I never looked back, to be honest. It's been quite a nice trajectory for me from then onwards.
Just on that, you getting released, Danny, from West Ham. I know we have a lot of Irish players at the moment going over to England. We've had a lot of them coming back as well after being released by various clubs. How difficult was that for you? Was it a difficult thing, kind of mentally even? I know you were you had one foot, I suppose, in the door of coaching then, but even as a player and as a very young player still, like, was that a difficult thing for you to hear?
Look, I was never signed at West Ham as an official player. I was on a trial, and I think that I signed the forms to play games, which I did. But for me, listen, I'm not going to lie, it broke my heart. I was a West Ham fan. This was that first phone call I got to say, would you like to come in and have a trial at West Ham? You could have probably seen my smile from space. I was so happy. And then to be told that it wasn't going to work out for me, I cried like a baby. I'm not even going to pretend. It destroyed me, and I didn't want to see anybody. I didn't want to speak to anybody. I gave up goalkeeping on the spot. I never put goalkeeper gloves on again. It was done. I didn't want to. And it was the right decision. That, by the way, I'm not criticising West Ham for it. I wasn't ever going to be big enough to be a goalkeeper at that level, and I think that made my decision up for me. With regards to where I went with my football from then onwards, but it's heartbreaking. It's an environment that can give you so much and take so much away in such a quick period of time. And it doesn't matter what pathway you're on, what part of that pathway you're on, it's something that needs to be looked at with regards to how that's managed going forward, especially with the younger players, especially if you've taken people out of their own environment and you put them maybe in another country or another part of the country, because it is soul destroying, because nobody wants to be told that they're not good enough. And I think that's everyone's fear. And it's even more brutal and even more ruthless in football.
And Danny, in terms of then becoming kind of like a coach, was it Chelsea you're a coach? I'm pretty sure at Chelsea.
Yeah, so that was my first role in an outfield capacity. Yeah, it was Chelsea. Yeah.
And in terms of what was your role in terms of Chelsea? Was it in the academy, or was it certain ages, or what did you do when you're at Chelsea Football Club?
No, so my first role was in the development centres. So I don't know if you have them here in Ireland, but in England, the big clubs especially, they'll have these satellite centres dotted around all over the place, and they try and bring in the players at sort of 6, 7, and 8 to get them ready so that they can offer them contracts when they turn 9, which is when the academy system starts in England. So my job was I was at a centre near where I lived, to be fair, working with those players. Talent identification, sort of highlighting players to the club that I think that are worthy of a contract offer for the following season. And yeah, that was kind of my first sort of real exposure to what the academy system looks like. And obviously Chelsea have got a fantastic record of producing players, and it was nice to be a part of that for that sort of period of time in my career.
And just kind of the opposite of what Stephen's question was, like, so you've obviously had the news of when you've been told as a player that you're not going to be taken on, say, for another year. What's it like then? Have you ever given that news to a player that, you know, your contract's not going to be renewed at the end of the season? And if so, like, how tough is it to bring that message to a footballer, to a young player? Like,
unfortunately, I've had to do it quite a lot and through the career, and you have to become quite tough quite quickly. I'm quite an emotional guy. I have a real close connection with my players with regards to them as people as opposed to players. I like to treat them like human beings at the end of the day. And I think when you're asking so much of lads, you've got to give something back as well. And I think that's part of one of my strengths as a manager, that I'd like to think that the majority of the players I worked with would say now that, listen, he cared about me, and he wanted me to be okay, and he wanted me to do well. And I think when you're talking, especially with lads as young as 9, 10, 11, when you're talking to them and you've got that look on their face that it's such a hard thing, because you can see they know it's coming. It's one of those, you don't want to hear it, but you know it's going to be you're going to be told it, and it's not nice at all. And I do think it's an area of football that needs to be looked at carefully. I think there's a better way of doing it than the way it's done. And I know that some clubs are already going down those lines, but I don't think that dragging a lad all the way from his house to a training ground to then sit him down and tell him that he's not going to get a contract, I don't think that's necessarily the best way. I think that there's a better way of doing it. And if the coaches and the staff are doing their jobs properly on a weekly basis, the feedback to the lad, it should never be a surprise. If the lad's shocked that he's being released, then I don't think the staff have done their job properly. And I think honesty is important. I think transparency is important. But yeah, no, it's not a nice experience to do it, and especially the younger ages. But also, I've had to release players that are adults, that are grown men, and it's never nice. Like I said earlier, it's not nice being told that you're not good enough, or you're not at the level that's expected at the club that you're at. And I think football's such an opinion-based sport that you can do it in a way where you can still inspire. And that's what I try to do. And it's, as I said, I don't think there's any right or wrong, but I have quite a strong opinion on that one.
If I was to tease that out further, what's a better way, in your opinion, to tell a young lad that, look, we're not going to offer you a contract? If I was to ask you there.
Well, like I said, firstly, so I don't know, again, the academy system in Ireland is a lot different than it is in England. So players in England, depending on what age bracket they're in, they'll get reviewed every 6 or 12 weeks. So that's a formal sit-down meeting with the player and going through where they're currently at in their progress and they're on their pathway at the club. So if you're doing that report basis and that feedback properly, when it comes to the actual decisions at the end of the season, if you've done your review process properly, that player should know where they stand already. There should be no surprises. The second part of it for me is that it should be up to the parents of the player how the news is broken to that child. The parents should have a say in it. They should say, they should be given the option. Would you like to do it? As parents, would you want to sit him down first, and then we can maybe have a meeting afterwards to discuss a plan forward, like what's the exit program look like? Does he want to come in and speak to us? Do you want us to come to the house and do it? These young players, boys and girls now with the academy system in England, they give up so much of their time for us to make the effort to make sure that they get released. I don't like the word release, but his terminology, get released in the right way. I think it wouldn't take a lot of organising. It wouldn't take a lot of work to do that.
I think it's an interesting perspective. Like, and obviously you kind of touched on Ireland. Like, I think that's a different sideshow in terms of where our academy structures are. We've only had national leagues the past 10 years, so we're just in different stratospheres there. But just fast forwarding a little bit then to kind of moving on to how you got into Braintree rather, and becoming in now kind of as assistant manager. How did that come about then? Because obviously your career to that date was in solely kind of youth football. So how did you come then the assistant manager at Braintree?
Well, so when I left West Ham, I was clear where I wanted to go. I wanted to be a manager, and I was actually doing my pro license at the time. And it was a really weird conversation, because I was actually at Manchester City's training ground. We were doing a part of our course was up there. We were getting a tour of the ground, and we was getting some talks from some of the staff at Manchester City. And I get this phone call from an agent who I know, who's a good friend of mine, and he said, "Dan, there's an opportunity for you to go into Braintree." And I was like, right, okay. It's not really what I was thinking, but okay, this could be interesting. And I said, "What's the position?" He said, "Assistant manager." And I said, "Like, who's going to be the manager?" And he said, Hakan, who it was. And I said, "Okay, I'll have a chat with Hack then and see where it goes." And I know Braintree anyway. When I was at West Ham, we played them in pre-season friendlies, so I knew where it was. It wasn't a million miles from my house either, so it kind of logistically it fit, and it would give me my first chance of being exposed to senior men's football, because at the end of the day, just like a player going out on loan, you want that experience. You want to get those games on your CV. Had a chat with Hack on the phone, and the next night we took our first game together. It was like literally within 24 hours of having the first phone call, I was there, and I was the assistant manager, and yeah, it kind of went on from there. But it was all a bit weird, because I'm sitting in this £200 million training ground, looking at all this amazing facilities and resources, and then next thing I know, I'm standing in the home dressing room at Braintree Town. So football works in mysterious ways, but I wouldn't have changed it for the world, to be fair.
And level-wise, are they Conference South? Is that where they were at the time, or what division?
No, we were in the National League at the time, so step 5 of English football, one below League 2. So it was a great challenge for us, because the resource-wise, the club was very poorly resourced compared to the rest of the National League. But we had a great time there, and I ended up getting my first manager's job out of it. So it was brilliant.
Yeah, and then obviously the manager had been sacked, and then you took over managed the end of the season, and then obviously then moved on to Aldershot. That's kind of the trajectory you went. Yeah,
look, Hack moved to Maidstone, and he asked me would I go, and I was like, well, obviously, yeah, I'd like to stay working with him. I had a good relationship with Hack, and the resources weren't there at Maidstone to bring me across, and I kind of saw something in the group, at Braintree. Sorry, there was a real youth about it, and excited me, and I thought, you know what, I've got to take the plunge at some point. And they said, would I take over till the end of the season? And I grabbed the opportunity with both hands, and I was quite fortunate that we went on a run. We managed to pick up more points in 16 games than they had the whole season. So we really came together, and it was a fantastic experience. And as you've already alluded to, it kind of gave me that opportunity to move to Aldershot for the following season.
If I even fast forward again now, obviously, he had about a year and a half at Aldershot, I think, because that's roughly in the same time I had.
2.5 years I was there.
2.5 years. And then the question is, how does a man from Essex end up in Waterford? That's kind of the question I have here. So how did you end up at the Waterford FC job?
Well, I knew Richard Forrest anyway. I'd worked with his sons when they were younger. They used to come to my soccer schools and stuff. And Richard half spoke to me about the Waterford job before the season started. And at the time, I wasn't in a place where I wanted to be away from my family or move to Ireland. And it was a bit like, okay. And I think he'd already half committed to Ian getting the job. And I was like, listen, that's fine, because I don't think I'm in the right place. And then obviously they relieved Ian of his duties, and he phoned me again. And it was, within reason, it was a no from me again, but not for anything to do with anything other than my family. We'd had a family holiday booked. We'd had quite a tough time behind the scenes from a family perspective with bereavement and whatnot. And I needed this holiday with my family. I needed to be with them. And I said, look, I know that probably kills me, and you're going to go and employ someone else, but I can't not be with them at the minute. I need this for myself just as much as I need to be there for them. And then literally 2 days before I flew back from America, Richard messaged me again and said, look, are you still interested? He said, the team's had a good run, but we don't feel that the environment is where we want it to be, blah, 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 blah. And I was like, look, I'm back Thursday. I'll meet you Friday for a coffee. And let's see where we go. And then that was the Friday. And on the Monday, I landed in Ireland. And that it was that much of a whirlwind, to the point where he never formally actually offered me the job. He just booked me a flight. And I was like, okay, Claire, I'm going to Ireland. And she was like, pardon? I said, I'm off to Ireland. And it was such a whirlwind. It's been different. Listen, it's been tough for the family, but they're very supportive, and I'm so glad I made the decision, because this is a great group of players, and I'd like to think that I have made a difference since I've been here.
And just in terms of you moving over to Ireland then and coming into the League of Ireland, did you know much about the league here as a whole? Were you impressed, disappointed? Like, what was your kind of thinking on it when you first came over?
I knew obviously several of the clubs in Ireland, because quite a few of the West Ham players that I'd worked with had either come from Ireland or they'd made a move out to Ireland at various points of their career. So I wasn't oblivious to it, but I'm not going to pretend that I had an unbelievable knowledge of the level of football and what it was about, because I didn't. And what I did know was several of the players that were already at Waterford, and I knew about their ability and their talent, and I thought, okay, they're players I can work with. And yeah, it's been an interesting experience, because there's some very good coaches and managers here. You can clearly see that. There's some very talented players in this country. You can clearly see that. I think there's some areas of the league that massively needs more, in the sense of the level. From an infrastructure perspective, you can see that, and the country's crying out for it, because everyone's stepping up. You mentioned the national teams, the national leagues now for the 17s and 19s, etc. Everything in Irish football stepping in the right direction, and I feel that they're on the cusp of actually really kicking on again. So it's exciting times for the country, and hopefully they can build on those new kind of formats that they've put in place.
And overall, just kind of in terms of those different formats and things like that, in your, I suppose, brief at the moment, or from since you took over tenure at Waterford, how are those kind of pathways and things like that looking? Have you been impressed in terms of players coming through and things like that?
Yeah, look, we've given a lot of debuts to lads. I think that Waterford being in the first division's helped that. I'm not sure how many would break in and play regularly in the Premier League, and that's not a criticism. I just don't know, because I've only witnessed what's in the first division at the minute. Obviously, we've played a couple of Premier League teams in the Cup, and you can clearly see there's a big gap between what you're playing week in, week out in the first division and what you'd be playing week in and week out in the Premier Division, which you'd expect. But I think that's sort of neither here nor there, because at the end of the day, we are in the first division, and we've been fortunate that quite a few of our young players have broke through, and long may that continue. But there's still work to be done, and I think culturally at the club we're onto something, but we need to make sure we keep building on that. And we've made progress in most areas, and obviously having the new owners in place, they're keen to accelerate that progress. And listen, the club's in a good place at the minute, and I'm not saying it's not going to hit any walls or they're not going to have some bad times ahead, because unfortunately that's football. You can't control that. But the general trajectory of the club is going in a really good direction.
Danny, in terms of the rest of the season, I suppose touching the playoffs first, obviously Waterford, I'm sure you're aware, were disappointed last year to go down, losing the playoff system. Is there a certain amount of pressure you think on Waterford to maybe bounce straight back up this season? Do you feel that pressure maybe from the stands or the media, or how do you see the situation at the moment?
I think there has to be pressure. I think a club of this size needs to be in the Premier League, and I always say to the players, pressure is a privilege. If you're not under pressure, then you're probably not doing anything that's worth doing. And we're in a position where we are under pressure, because we should be in the Premier League, and with the squad that we've got. I don't want to speak of what went on before I was here, but the form since I've taken over, we're top of the form table, and I think that's with dropping some points, and that we probably shouldn't have with some interesting refereeing decisions, if I can say that politically correctly. Interesting would probably be the best word. So I'd like to think if we had a full season together, we would have been a lot more successful than what we have been, and that's not taking anything away from what we've achieved. At the end of the day, we're still in an FAI Cup semi-final, and we're as I said, we're the most informed team in the country at the minute. Sorry, in the league at the minute. So you'd like to think we've got a good chance of getting promoted through the playoffs, and that should be expected of this group of players and myself, and that's the pressure we have to take, because otherwise, what are we doing it for?
Yeah, I know you just touched on going up there and the cup run and things like that. How important do you think it is in terms of Waterford going up and doing well in the playoffs then? I mean, I know you've had some lads coming in, Baptiste, for example, and every time I go through my Twitter feed, there seems to be something about Phoenix Patterson scoring a great goal. So how important do you think it is for Waterford as a club to go up into the Premier Division, to be able to hold on to players like that?
Phoenix is a very talented lad, and we're fortunate we've got quite a few that are very talented. It's imperative that you secure the nucleus of your squad. One thing that is interesting, I keep seeing online about Phoenix is going to Shamrock, and Phoenix is going here, and Phoenix is going there, and blah blah. Phoenix is not going to any other team in Ireland. He's not going anywhere. So if he's going somewhere, I would have thought he'd probably be back across the water. But those conversations have not been had. He's fully focused on winning the Golden Boot in the First Division, getting promoted. We're 2 games away from playing in Europe, and there's not many clubs you can play for where you can say that. So the bottom line is Phoenix, Alex, everybody, they're all on board. They're all on the bus, the Waterford promotion bus, if you want to call it that, and that's the direction we're heading in. So, but like you said, it's important that we not only retain that level of player, but that's the level of player we look to recruit in the summer as well, because I'm not so sure about the recruitment at the start of the season.
It's a real shame that you say that Phoenix wants to hang around. I was hoping he might sign for Bose.
Yeah, I don't think that's going to happen, mate. I don't think he's going anywhere in Ireland. I might be wrong. I'm just saying, knowing what his contract situation is, and knowing that our new owners are who they are, I can't see him being sold to anybody. I don't think anyone in Ireland would be able to afford him, to be fair, for what they'd probably want for him.
I can imagine, yeah, he's a talented player, all right.
Well, I said we'll take 10 million euros for him. There you go. anyone wants to pay that, they can have him. I'll drive him there myself.
Danny, if I can finish off, then I'd be remiss not to ask you about the game coming up now in 2 weeks' time against Shelbourne in the RSC FAI Cup semi-final. The squad, yourself, the fans, you must just be buzzing for the occasion.
Yeah, and look, I think again, you talk about pressure. We are under pressure because we expect to progress. I know we're not the favourites, and rightly so. They're a Premier League side, we're not, and they'll go into the game as favourites. But Dundalk went into the game as favourites, and so did St Pat's. And the bottom line is, we proved that we're capable of going toe to toe with these teams. The biggest issue will be, can we do it consistently? And so, if you can knock 3 Premier League teams out of the cup, I think we deserve to be in the final. And if we don't, then we don't deserve to be there. So there's a great vibe around the town. There's a great buzz around the town, and it's up to us as the staff and players to keep that buzz by winning football matches. And I don't think there's any bigger games left at the minute than Shells at home. So yeah, no, listen, really, really looking forward to it.
Well, Danny, best luck rest of the season. Good luck with the playoffs and good luck with the semi-final.
No, all the best, guys. Really lovely to meet you. Take care.
Cheers, Danny. Thanks a million.
Get in touch. You can email us at extratimelive@gmail.com or tag us on Instagram using the hashtag League of Ireland, or tweet us at extratimenews.
Let's do it.
And welcome back to part 3. Delighted to say Steve and Dave are still alongside me. Lads, just before we finish up, a quick chat mate about the Europa League conference game coming up. I know Steve will be hoping for a Mull to win, but we'll move on to Dave.
100%.
Yeah, he might be a little less biased. Dave, what we thinking then? A big game for Rovers if they want to try somehow progress out of this group?
Yeah, it's going to be tough. Obviously, they only have a point, bottom of the group on goal difference. I think the main thing is that the last game, Molde and Djurgårdens finished 3-2, was it? So both teams obviously can score goals. Rovers' problem so far in the group has been that they haven't scored goals, and they haven't particularly looked like scoring too many goals either. So especially going away to Molde, it's going to be tough playing against a team who are used to playing at this level, used to scoring goals at this level. So it's going to be another upward curve for Rovers to face. I think they'll need to turn around some of the. I suppose they haven't been conservative in the group so far, but they've been adapting to a higher level, and it's been difficult. But they're going to need to score goals, because I can't see them keeping a clean sheet. So yeah, it's going to be a difficult game, but obviously the prize is there if they win. And depending on the result in the other game, they could be right up there towards second place. So it's still all up in the air at the moment. But I just think that at the moment it's looking a bit difficult for them. But I hope it changes. I hope Jack Byrne having another couple of weeks. Gaffney gets finds a scoring touch in Europe, and it could be a different picture. But it's going to be very difficult.
Yeah, I think what you said there, if they could somehow pull off a win there, that would really open the group up, especially with Molde. I know Ghent have to come to Dublin, that'd be a tough game, but you're at home, they have a good record at home as well. And then that game then away to Djurgårdens too, it just hinges on this game. If they can somehow pull out the bag and get a win, it really opens the group up.
Yeah, well, it's the level they want to be playing at. Like there's no way to learn how to play games at this level except by playing them. And the reality is the League of Ireland is not as strong as the Swedish League, not as strong as the Norwegian League, certainly not as strong as the Belgian League. So, and even we saw yesterday, Club Brugge winning the first three games in the Champions League. So it shows what a standard the Belgian champions are at. So, to play these games, you have to just play teams of this level, and those teams are playing teams of a higher standard every week, and that's just the case. It is a step up, and the only way that they can make that step up is to keep on playing these sort of games. Like I remember years ago on the old podcast, two Extra Time podcasts ago, Robbie Benson coming on after the Legia Warsaw game. You remember the one where he scored that, amazing volley, and just talking about, like the levels for just Legia playing a league that's strong enough that they need to dig deep, week after week. And Dundalk just didn't have that at the time. They weren't playing at that higher level, and they recognised that these teams were playing at a higher level, and they were always playing catch up. So that's really the challenge that Rovers have at the moment. But like I said, the only way you can learn is by playing these games. Yeah,
100%. It gathers experience for the players. Steve, have you watched any of the Shamrock Rovers games? Have you been somewhat intrigued how they get along? Or I can tell by your face that there on Zoom you're not really willing to speak.
Yeah, I've been intrigued as to how they'd get on. All right, I think I've seen little bits and pieces of them. I can't say I go out of my way to watch Shamrock Rovers games. I just can't do it. I can't find it within myself. They could be playing the World Cup final or the Champions League final or whatever, and I'd probably struggle to put it on. But yeah, I mean, like Dave was saying, it's a big step up for any Irish club. Obviously, Rovers over the last couple of years have been consistently the best and strongest Irish club. Just winning the league, doing like having decent runs in Europe, and obviously this kind of being the best in the last couple of years. So, I mean, it's great for the league. It's awful for those fans, but yeah, any kind of help to the coefficient, any kind of financial help to the league, that kind of stuff is obviously going to be good. But just from a rival's point of view, it's not an easy watch. Unless they live, then it's a nice watch.
Yeah, but I think that's the nicest thing you're ever going to say about Shamrock Rovers is helping the coefficient. Before you finish up, Dave, quick word on the fixture congestion at the end of the season. You wanted to just mention it briefly?
Yeah, so as expected, Rovers are playing their final Conference League game on November 3rd. So the last round of fixtures because the last day they all have to be played at the same time. It's been moved from the Friday to the Sunday, which unfortunately coincides with the Women's FAI Cup final. So they'll both basically be back to back, and they'll both be shown on RTE. But the Cup final and the Rovers UCD will be shown on RTE. But unfortunately, it's going to take an awful lot away from the publicity for the Cup final, which normally last year anyway, they were given their own day, and it's great publicity from that. And unfortunately, that's gone now. So I think it's unfortunate, and think we're going to hear an awful lot more about it. But it's just it doesn't seem to be very well planned out whatsoever. But it's the League of Ireland. You can't really expect planning.
Yeah, it's when you told me there before we hopped on, I think that's poor. I think, could not have done Monday night games just for a one-off, something like that. I don't know. It just seems very poor timing. Again.
Yeah. I cannot speak. If I speak, I'm in trouble.
Yeah, a classic Jose Mourinho quote. Yeah, look, lads, I think we'll leave it there. A quick run through the fixtures for this weekend. Dundalk are facing St. Patrick's, Derry City, Finn Harps, Northwest Derby, Bowes Strada, UCD Sligo Rovers, and Shamrock Rovers v Shells. In the first division, we have Cork City, Wexford, Cove Ramblers, Longford Town, Galway United at Lone, and Waterford Treaty United. Lads, thanks as always, and we'll see you all next week.